had me drinking Goldschlager on the floor of my kitchen directly from the bottle. Like, I had rock bottom from that.
Hello and welcome to the Recovering Trauma podcast series on this channel. The purpose of this is to give people the chance to tell their stories of how they took trauma that happened to them and reclaimed it and are drawing inspiration from it and are using it to encourage other people where they are in their struggles. This is the story of Kai Ping and how purity culture lied to him and really hurt him. But I will let him tell his story, and I thank you so much for being here. Let's jump right in. First, I want to say that it's fine that you want to walk around and just making a note of that for anybody who's watching this, that if people are comfortable to move around, they can do that.
Yeah, I'm a pacer, so buckle up for a tour of my kitchen.
Yeah, I'm just really thankful for you being willing to come on my podcast conversation thing and share out of a traumatic place. Someone asked me recently in the comments of a video, like, what do you mean reclaim trauma? Isn't trauma something that you want to just move past? But I feel like reclaiming it means you get to decide what those things that happen to you mean and how you can help other people with them. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, trauma is trauma. It's different for everyone, and the extent, the damage from it, it's almost impossible to quantify. And for some people, that might be best, just to swallow it, bury it, and move on. I think we as a species have been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. Like, our ancestors probably experienced far more massive trauma. Watching family members be eaten alive while you're running away. So I definitely think our brains are kind of evolved to handle trauma. And yeah, if you want to bury it, I have no criticisms with that. But for those, I really love what, that term reclaim is awesome. Because for some of us who want to grow, we want to kind of find meaning with it. I fall under that tent. And yeah, for those of us who want to reclaim it, like, I'm happy and I'm honored to be here, Katie, to be part of that fuel.
That's
of
awesome.
Bringing some momentum towards reclaiming the trauma from evangelical Christianity and purity culture.
So jumping right in, here's a good starting off question. What was it like being an Asian kid in a white Christian world?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents are both from Taiwan. A lot of Taiwanese immigrated over in the 70s. And I had lots of Asian friends in the Bay Area. Same story, Taiwanese parents, refugees of war. And I didn't fit in with them. I really just didn't fit in. And yeah, it's kind of like an outlier in that friend group. And yeah, like, then I just kind of found that community in a church, in a white evangelical free church.
So why do you feel why didn't you fit in with them? What was holding you back from them?
Well, I think I'm a bit eccentric. I think I'm the type of Asian guy who would go on a podcast and discuss purity culture. Like, most Asian males are too busy, doing your taxes, or like, reading your charts and telling you about what your high blood pressure means. I'm certainly much more, I'm just kind of different. I think I'm much more extroverted, much more emotional. And I didn't fit in with them. And my career, I ended up in music. So that shows, most of my friends are attorneys and doctors and engineers. Most of my friends from back in elementary school. So I feel like the evangelical church was a great kind of landing pad for me, because it's kind of filled with, reject. It's kind of filled with outliers, but it is also filled with the core group of people who have parents, who've been evangelical for generations. And these kids are white, less engaged, they're kind of more forced to be there, less into kind of the morals and the teaching, but more just there. And something that was really disappointing is that later on, actually pretty much in the era of Trump, I have discovered that they were racist. It was just always kind of clouded, kind of cloudy, nebulous. But now in hindsight, some 20 years later, now I can see that, the racism in the evangelical church was widely accepted. For example, when I went to summer camp one year, somebody in my cabin, bunk beds and like group of 8 kids or 7 kids and a leader. And somebody in there put up a Confederate flag in the window. And I'm this like 15-year-old, 16-year-old high school kid. And I didn't understand the significance of that symbol. I watched Dukes of Hazzards when I was a kid. And my leader, a guy who I respected and admired, he was just like, oh, that's just them being white boys. That was his explanation of it. So that kind of glossing over, that was endemic.
So did you feel like there's something not quite right about this flag, but I don't know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine who is white, he looked at it and he took it down immediately.
Oh.
And his reaction to, because I wouldn't have dared to do it, as like the only Asian kid in the whole camp. I wouldn't have dared to do it, but his reaction about immediately taking down was like, oh, I guess there is significance to that. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Just wanted to clear it up a little bit. I wanted to hear more about what you were talking earlier about the model minority thing and what that meant to your family to fit in.
Yeah, great question. I mean, being Asian, my dad moved to the US to get his PhD in engineering from Cal. So he's like top 1% of 1%, academically speaking. And, he worked his little Asian butt off to get that doctorate. And he wanted us to really just keep our heads down, go to school, not rock the boat. That's something that was not explicitly taught to us, but it was clear that we were supposed to keep our heads down, not complain, fall into the system. And I think, even though my parents didn't directly support me going to that church, and they never went to that church with me, but I believe that was partially a factor, kind of, it evolved from that, my desire to kind of assimilate into white culture. And I think my story is very similar across other Asian Americans. Christianity, evangelicalism among Asian Americans is big. There's a lot of Asian American megachurches, at least in Southern California. I don't know about Utah or other places. It's the other way around. There's like the token white person that's in the church of all Asian people. And I think the reason why we adopted a white version of Christianity. We don't have like Southern Baptists, like we don't have, the Black Christian experience is much different in terms of worship, church structure, dogma, almost in every way. We adopted a very white kind of version of church, where if you didn't see the audience, if you couldn't see the ethnicity of the pastor, like the subject, the dogma, the worship style, everything was very, very similar. So I think that really shows, why we're the model minority. We really kind of embraced white culture in every way. And my kind of embrace of evangelicalism, I think, is a trickle down from that aspect.
I had a question I wanted to ask. Did you, when white evangelical friends came over, did you like hide or just kind of, we don't go in that room where the altar to the ancestors lived?
Good question. We didn't have altars in the US.
Okay.
I have one here. But we didn't have altars in the US. My parents were actually, they classified themselves as Christian. So they pretty much, there were missionaries in Taiwan who were giving out rice. I think they were Baptist missionaries. And, my parents needed rice. So they went and they accepted Christ. Like they kind of had that experience there. And here they kind of culturally classified themselves as Christian. It's crazy. They adopted it, but by the time they got to the US, they became culturally Christian. I was the one who kind of, pretty much caught a second wind and went to evangelical church. So we didn't have those types of altars. I wasn't hiding to my evangelical friends because I wasn't aware of the racism. I was really aloof to it. And yeah, interestingly, now I have a daughter. It's kind of falling apart. But actually, here's my altar now. I got a spot for incense and a photo of my grandparents and some candles. And this is just because I want my daughter to be brought up with that tradition. Do I believe that I'm actually talking to my ancestors? No. Do I believe that like burning the incense and bowing 3 times like makes any unseen spirit like give us more money or something? No, of course not. But I think the ritual is important, and it connects her with her family, her cousins and uncles in Taiwan, and it just connects her with that culture.
So growing up evangelical, do you remember when you first kind of internalized purity culture?
I think it was right away. When I became a Christian, I accepted Jesus into my heart when I was 16. At that point, like I almost like started embracing republicanism, like how much I jumped in with both feet. That didn't last long because I immediately saw, I was like, wait a second, we're supposed to take care of the poor. So no, I'm going to be a liberal. So that part was clear to me, but that's an illustration of how quickly like I just adopted purity culture. Even stuff like masturbation, I was like very, very, I'm in.
Shameful.
Yeah, that crazy Old Testament story about that guy who like jizzed on the floor and he died immediately, which is so different than the rest of the Bible.
It wasn't even about the act. It was about the fact that he was supposed to impregnate his sister-in-law.
Yeah. I mean, that story is such an outlier compared to a God of mercy, of great, a God that I no longer believe in. But the God characterized by Paul and by Jesus is a God of abounding mercy. And that whole New Testament, at least for me, that whole New Testament God was covered over by that fucking story of that guy who died. And I have that kind of weight on me. When I was,
you're like, if I do this, I'm gonna die. Oh crap, I did it. When am I gonna die?
Yeah, exactly. No, totally. And that's kind of typical evangelical trauma. Now we're going full circle to trauma. That's typical evangelical trauma that kids all over the universe are dealing with, and it sucks.
So how was it meeting your ex-wife? What's your story with her?
So meeting her, she and I, like, she was also brought up evangelical. Her parents are certainly more conservative than mine. So her kind of evangelicalism was more a factor of her upbringing, whereas mine was like, I just really believed in it. I was really passionate about it. But yeah, I mean, we did it. Like, we dated, we were in college. We're in Boston, so we're both kind of like fish out of water. I'm from California, she's from New Hampshire. And because we were just kind of alone in this new universe, like we really just connected with each other. And we connected physically as well, but we didn't have sex. Just exactly like you said, the fear, the specter of it, kind of all that weight that's put on virginity, which is completely meaningless. If anybody is out there, where's the camera? If anybody's out there, don't put the weight in virginity. There's no value there. Thank you, Katie. Thanks for that amen.
I hear that amen.
I'll take it. So it was 5.5 years of dating and engagement before we got married. And anyways, to answer your question of how we met, like those were the circumstances. We met in a Campus Crusade event. Campus Crusade, hopefully everybody out there is kind of familiar with their, psycho crazy dogma. Are you familiar at all with Campus Crusade?
I've heard of it. I assume that it's in that same kind of vein of if a person leaves, then they're ostracized and not spoken about again.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think they're, just like anything, they're much more like culty strains of it. But yeah, it was pretty extreme. And yeah, that's how our dating relationship was. A whole lot of sexual trauma, sexual tension and trauma of like going really far, going kind of really far, like non-intercourse, sexual activity, feeling guilty, praying, and like this whole, cycle that just carried on, and then just trauma every time we went through the cycle, just feeling guilty for being attracted to each other and being aroused, and then that really sucked. That was a difficult time.
And then you were finally married. You're finally allowed to do it. And then what happened?
Finally allowed to, be in that environment that God intended, that God made sex for this, that all of creation, he made the planets, he made the fucking dinosaurs and everything. And he made sex, like all that desire for this. And I mean, guess what happened? Of course you can assume what happened. It was just so forced. It was so tense. It was so, there's so much expectation on it. There's such a burden on it. Yeah, like we both lost our virginity on our wedding night, which is on paper the evangelical dream. But sex wasn't good for us. Like we found out that we were not sexually compatible, or maybe we were sexually compatible, but like the whole arc of how our sexual attraction should have been was just marred by all of this dogma.
Like if you just gotten it over with a few years earlier, it probably would have been better. Well,
I speculate about that all the time. I think that if we had just had sex when we were dating, I think we would have figured out that we're not compatible. I would think we would have figured out that we're not a great couple. We're very different. And I think we probably could have saved ourselves the heartbreak of getting married and breaking up. Because like getting married for sex, that was a factor. And again, I'm looking at the camera, like, don't get married for sex. Don't let that be a factor. That's such a silly factor to get into it. I mean, marriage, marriage is like, it's very difficult. You guys have to be roommates. You guys have heard the nightmare roommate stories. You guys have to be financial partners. That's massive. You guys have to be friends. You guys have to be co-parents and sexual partners. Like, you guys have so many factors. Don't let that, like, that focus on sex, like I want to have sex with that person, that is absurdly trivial compared to, can I talk to this person? Can I be vulnerable with this person? That is so much more important. Can we handle finances, in a functional way with this person? So much more important.
So how long were you married before the hardest thing in your entire life happened?
I was married for about 5 years. Yeah, about 5.5 years before I found out that not only had she cheated, but she cheated on me with somebody who I asked her to stop talking to, who was on my radar, and then she lied to me about it. And I almost feel like if she just told me, like, hey Kai, I fucked up, like I want to work on it, our marriage, I want to save this, I want to kind of, be good on my vows to you, that would have been like acceptable for me. But she was too cowardly to tell me. And that's, I think that was, when you speak of the most, like, the worst trauma in my life, I think that was it. The betrayal from her. That was by far it. That happened in 2013. And then hence began the period of sluttiness for Kai Ping, and lots of drinking. Then I kind of went into my Solomon phase, to use a biblical term. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. It's like it rocked your entire world, and it just turned everything on its head, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that. So during our marriage, sex wasn't great. Again, it was just very forced. Evangelical men are entitled to sex, right?
Yeah, because if the woman isn't just a receptacle, then he will look at porn and it'll be her fault.
Yeah, definitely. But that first point that you made, that's her function. A married evangelical wife, like, is designed to satisfy the sexual needs of her husband, and like, I'm a feminist, I'm liberal, that's something that I would never impose on her. But that specter, that kind of weight, again, that trauma of just not being able to just be attracted and like have sex because it's fun, the obligation, just the duty, like all these things that should not be in the bedroom.
That's like the least sexy thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah, definitely. And we were kind of under that. So we, sex wasn't great for us. And I was just always kind of waiting. This is what Christians do. Like, God made me a promise and I have to wait. It's like fucking, well, who is it? Abraham and Sarah, who had to wait like 50 years, something like that. I just have to wait. Like, we'll have our kind of sexual peak later. And yeah,
did she say, like, I don't want to do this, or did you know that she was doing things out of obligation?
Yeah, I did. And we found the balance. I wasn't holding it over her head and being like, all right, we need to have sex every day. Like, but once or twice a month, I was like, hey, we want to have kids one day. Like, can you meet me like 10% away? Like, so that's kind of where we survived. That's kind of where we limped along.
No wonder you had a slutty phase afterwards.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that if there's anybody listening who's struggling with purity culture, or who's considering it, like, what I would want to say is that, the main thing I want to say is that people change, and it's okay for people to change. My ex changed through her 20s. Like, we got married. I met her when she was 18, and she was so young. So we waited until she was 24. I was 28. And by the time she was 30, she was a different person, and that's okay. She finished her school, like, she kind of had her experience as an adult, and she didn't want to be married to me. That's kind of what I've accepted. Obviously, the trauma of the affair and all that sucked, and had me drinking Goldschlager on the floor of my kitchen directly from the bottle. Like, I had rock bottom from that. But in hindsight, and she and I are in touch now. I'm probably not going to tell her I'm doing this, but she and I are in touch now, and like, I have peace with the fact that she just changed. So it's okay for people to change. Back when Joseph and Mary got married, Mary was 14. You like start having kids at age 14, and like, that's it. your husband's a carpenter. That's what he's doing for the rest of his life. Now we like finish our advanced degrees in our mid to late 20s, and we've got the whole world ahead of us. It's okay for us to change. And yeah, I think it's okay to hold marriages a little bit less with a looser grip. I think marriage is a fine institution to do, but people change, and don't put your virginity, like your whole sexual identity, into one person. It's silly.
Yeah, it's not that, like, people say, yeah, marriage is hard. Marriage is hard, but you're not supposed to be absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to hate your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that you went back to the whole purity culture thing, because I want to hear more about how you are going to raise your daughter in regards to your culture and your experience with this purity culture, like the whole concept of virginity being absolutely fake.
Thanks. Great question. I mean, I already showed you my my shrine. We are telling my daughter that she's 3 right now, by the way. We're telling her that Santa exists. We're okay with like some of this, we're talking about magic, talking about unicorns, we're okay with that kind of world for her. But if she's 10 and she's believing in Santa, or she believes that when we pray, when we go to our shrine, that we're actually talking to her great grandparents, then I'm going to explain to her that all that's silly. What we see in this world, what science can prove, that's reality. So I'm gonna pretty much raise her on the religion of science, peer-reviewed, data-driven. That is the explanation of the world. Now, specifically with purity culture, I'm gonna tell her it's the same concept. Like, don't think I'm going to equate like the specter of virginity, because I'm sure she's going to get it from her friends or just from culture, pop culture, the weight, the significance of it. I'm going to liken that to Santa Claus. It's just a fairy tale. It's just something to help us kind of organize the world.
It's an anciently rooted thing having to do with selling women.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, the fact is that the Bible doesn't really talk about virginity that much. We can extrapolate when Paul was talking about, like, be sexually pure, abstain from sexual immorality. We're probably talking about, monogamy in kind of a marriage context. But be that as it may, the Bible does not put the weight of on virginity that's consistent with, how our societies take it. Just like we talk about abortion way more heavily than the Bible does. So those are perfect kind of metaphors of how significant virginity is. The reality is that back in the day, when you married off your girls, so if I were to marry off my daughter, I would get a shitload of money for her, and she would have no value if she wasn't a virgin. If she was already divorced, she would have no value. That is the significance of virginity comes from that. And that's, as soon as she's young enough to understand that, I'm going to tell her that. Now, this is what a condom is. Like, this is what spermicide is. Like, this is what a calendar is. This is what an STD is. I'm not going to just tell her to be unsafe. And there's a lot of emotional connection. There is a lot of damage that comes. I understand why the evangelical church tries to protect people. Sex can be damaging and traumatic if it's not done in a safe way. And I mean trauma in the same way. I think sex can be as damaging as, not unsex. I think there's a good balance in between. And so what I'll tell her is that, if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whichever way she goes, and you guys are monogamous for a year, then I wouldn't not experiment with it. I'm not telling you to like experiment and have sex here we've been together for 365 days exactly, let's have sex. That's not what I'm saying. But in my wisdom, kind of with what I went through with my ex, that I think is a good balance.
Yeah, it's like, if you're safe, if you're comfortable, if you are mentally and monetarily prepared for the consequences of having a child, there's these factors that they should spend more time talking about rather than just your worth.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, don't put too much of value on virginity. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, like Call of Duty is like my favorite video game in the world. I get so much joy out of Call of Duty. It's like having sex. Like, I don't remember the first person I played Call of Duty with. You know what I mean? It's like, think of it that way. By the way, yes. I don't like Call of Duty. That's just an illustration.
Just an example. What would you say to the person whose marriage was set up for failure through purity culture, whose heart is freshly broken from that loss?
I've been through it. There is another side. There is not infinite loneliness. It's not too late for you. You haven't lost all of your hotness. My ex left me as I'm entering like my dad bod, fat phase. And I ended up marrying this British chick that I met while I was traveling in Vietnam, and we have a rad kid together, and we're, going to travel all over the world together. There is hope. And you know what? The hope isn't even in another partner. That was kind of my mistakes, going back to the drinking Goldschall around the kitchen. I really just externalized my worth in other people in a relationship. That's also like another trauma from evangelicalism, that like I am worthless, and but that's another podcast. So you have value, you out there, you have value. And it is crushing. It is such a loss that the whole promise that you save yourself for marriage and that God will bless your marriage and it will be successful, that sucks. I discovered that promise is false. And if you're discovering that now, then please call me. This is, the worst reveals, the worst kind of discoveries in your life. And I would love to help. I'll comment. I'll find this on YouTube and put my email address in the comments. But people change, and it's okay. I'm just going back to that. People change. Your spouse has changed. You've changed, and that's okay. We get to like discover the world and change. Like, this is awesome that our generation gets to do this. When they wrote the Bible, people didn't change. By the time you fucking go through puberty, like, that's it. You are who you are. So we have this opportunity to have a second life. I'm moving out of this continent. I'm in America now. I'm moving to Europe, and I'm doing it in my 40s. I'm switching careers. We get to do that. That's awesome. It's a gift. So although you feel stuck, like your whole life was a lie and like you've lost everything, don't look at it that way. This is a gift. You can try something new. And what I did is I started solo international travel. I started just traveling all through Asia, Europe, South America, Central America, Australia, and the Middle East. And like, it was awesome. And I missed that time. Like, I love my wife, I love my family, but I missed that time. And my divorce gave me the opportunity to do that. So I would travel. If I were you, just get out of Dodge, go to Southeast Asia. Vietnam is where I met my wife. You can do Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam for $1,000. So do it. That's what I would say.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending this time. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we say goodbye?
Katie, this was a total honor, total pleasure to do this. Sorry for everybody if your motion sickness is kicking in by my erratic movements. But I just wanted to say that I really admire you for what you're doing. I'm on board with you. I have my own blog called postchristianity.net, where I'm writing about my deconstruction. So there's my shameless plug. But no matter what, I feel passionate about helping people heal from Christianity. And I'm also passionate about kind of doing damage control for how much Christianity is hurting the US and kind of democracy as a whole. So thank you for being a part of that, partnering with me in that.
Yeah, I am passionate to help people dealing with toxic thinking.
Yes.
That is the root of so much. And so whatever we can do to help people get out of toxic thinking and making the world a better place, I am for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way that I end my conversations is I give hugs. Hugs. And I will put your links in the description and people can find you and connect with you. And thank you so much. Bye.
This was a huge pleasure and honor. Thank you. Bye, Katie.
If this resonated with you, please share below in the comments. Please share this video with someone else that you think it would be meaningful for. I want these podcast conversations to reach the people that they are meant to reach.
I kind of understand their premise that, marriage is hard and you have to make a choice, some hard choices when, times get tough. But if you're never happy, there's a problem.
The fear, the specter of it, kind of all that weight that's put on virginity, which is completely meaningless.
Just for me personally, I can't not be honest. And so, I'm not going to censor myself around people. That's stupid. And so, it's not stupid. It's just doesn't seem right.
I also believe that we make mistakes and we need accountability and we need to agree to grow.
If you'd like to hear a bit of my purity culture story and the way that I wrestled through these feelings, you can check out this video here. Thank you so much. Hugs.